Greetings, everybody. Welcome to Terra Prime Live, the Mandalorian Season 2 wrap-up episode here. I'm just going to start this out right away by telling everybody spoilers, big-time spoilers. Everything is going to be spoiled here. Everything from the beginning of the season all the way to the end. We're going to be talking about it till death. So, if you have not seen it, if you don't want it spoiled, leave now. Come back after you finish it, and we will get. And then you can enjoy it. With us today, we have speakers from us, from our apprentices and council and all of that. We've got Eric, Desso, and John and Jared. How's everybody doing tonight? Good? Okay.
And
Excellent, thanks.
great.
All right, cool. So we got our muting, chops involved here. So I guess we just start right into it because season 2 finale happened. Everybody's mind going crazy. Yeah. Lot to talk about. We'll talk about how a little bit about the finale here, but also kind of wrap up the whole season, because I just watched it today from beginning to end. I went from whatever episode it is at the beginning of season 2 all the way through to the end 9, and I gotta say, it actually cuts together as a single very long movie very well. Probably better than it feels like it went better than when it was episodic. Whereas the first season seemed more episodic, whereas when you're watching it kind of all the way through, it feels like different scenarios. Where I watched this one through and it's kind of seems to be more connected. And then it was mentioned that there's so much of these kind of little soft pilots for all of these series that have been announced. So that's something that needs to be addressed as well, because we have a lot of returning characters, a lot of not so returning characters, and characters who are kind of out in limbo. So first, I guess, general impressions of the last episode of the season finale.
Well, I think, as you said, we should jump right into it. And the elephant in the room that everyone's probably really champing at the bit to discuss here. How on earth did they decide where blast doors go?
That is a great question.
They sure seem to pop up at random convenience, don't they? Who is the engineer who stands around and, okay, that random hallway,
right,
and then like the bridge, but not the brig.
Well, if the ship suffers a catastrophic loss of pressure, nobody really cares about the prisoners, right? So we don't need a blast door there.
I guess, yeah, true, right. Yeah.
So humor aside,
there's a couple of those little technical there. Oh, joining us. Hello, Anna. So I think there was a couple of little, as I was watching it today, every single episode has one little kind of continuity error, right? To the point, not really big or anything like that, but like one little, like, there's one. This one, I guess the blast doors didn't strike me, but what it was Baby Yoda changing or Grogu changing the channel on the video feed when he had his hand up against it, because it kept going to like different, it was different cameras and stuff like that to follow.
I got the impression it was more like when your dog stares at PBS when you leave it on.
Right. No.
They don't perceive what's happening. They're just seeing shapes and stuff move around.
Well, that's my point. Like he was watching that one screen and it conveniently went to everywhere action was going. But That was my own.
But
That was
that's
my only
also a security cam. It's going to automatically change location based on motion and explosion of giant super killer robots.
Maybe. I didn't think that. I thought that they had separate monitors for all of the cameras up on that console there. So
Wait, what if what if that was the one member of the crew that they forgot to dispose of? There's just some dude in a security room somewhere who's switching
yeah,
the CATV
just
around.
switching the cameras.
He's feeding the bridge information, right? He's like, oh, there's something happening here, and they need to.
Right. Oh my God! Why aren't you guys doing anything about this?
Are they following this intruder?
He's got his electric dance music going, so he didn't know the Mandos had taken everybody out.
Right. Yeah.
Well, he was playing Galaga on the other monitor.
Yeah.
Right. When the first attack was going on.
Life Day's coming up. He's got a shopping window open.
Yeah. Anyway, so we're all fairly satisfied with the way the season wraps up here?
Extremely pleased.
Okay.
John, you seem tentative.
So this was something, and maybe it has to do with expectations, right? Because regardless of getting up at 3 a.m. to beat everybody to the punch, I woke up to a message from my friend that works third shift. And he was, posted a funny GIF of a guy screaming, and he was like, "Oh my gosh, it's crazy! It's crazy! It's crazy! You guys got to see it! You guys got to see it!" So I watched it silently in my room, not being able to squeal or scream or hoot or holler because my wife was sleeping in the next room, and I really enjoyed it, and I really did. And in my 3 a.m. cloudiness, right, the moment happens right at the end that. Not that moment, the other moment when it's like, oh, one X-Wing, woohoo, what's it gonna do? And I was like, oh my gosh, right? It's Wolf and Blue, right? They're gonna come and right, the New Republic's gonna show up. And then they're like, oh, one X-Wing. And I'm like, where's the rest of the X-Wings? And I was like, one X-Wing, I was like, oh shit, they're actually gonna do it, right?
Right.
And then, and then at that moment, it was over. But my biggest question is, and not to start off on a not, oh my God, it was amazing, it was great, because it really was. Foot is it too much fan service?
So, I kind of see where you're coming from here, because I'm probably one of the very few people that was a little underwhelmed when Luke showed up, just because it seemed like that would be, I almost was half expecting it, because it just doesn't like it's the only logical, choice or whatever. And it totally works with everything and all that kind of thing. But there's this like lingering hope in my mind that they were going to somehow completely subvert what we were expecting, like in the first season, and just like go, oh, I thought they were going to do that, but they went on this totally different thing. I'm not saying that they didn't leave us with a whole lot of like, holy shit, but, I kind of feel you on that one.
But
that it's
not to say that, right? I'm happy they didn't subvert expectations to any extent, right? We're not going to. That's not what this discussion is about. We're not going to talk about the other movies, but so it was great, and like I said, I really enjoyed it, and it was amazing. It's just a little tick in the back of my head was like, is it too much?
Is it
because it's, and my wife's yelling at me from the other room. The idea, my thought was in the setup. Now, many of us, I don't want to go on too much about the last episode. Let's talk about the whole season, right? Let's go back to that before I keep going. I'll bring this point up later. It'll be better served later on. Since we're into
we are talking about we're doing a little thing about this the last episode, so we can talk about that. But anyway, go ahead, Jared.
So, I'm thinking this will circle back around to the Luke issue. If we want to talk about character development. So at first I woke up yesterday morning to a tweet from Mark Hamill saying, "See anything good on TV lately?" or something like that.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh no, what'd they do?
Yeah.
So I was expecting some fishy business, but it makes complete sense. So I'm thinking, if we think about this in terms of character development, right? When you're a writer, you want to see the characters go from A to C and then eventually fill in what happened with B. This is point B. Like, we've gone from young idealistic Luke to weird Jedi teenager, not quite quasi dark powers, Return of the Jedi Luke, to grumpy old man Luke. And something happens in between, and we know now that the Jedi Academy is destroyed by the crazy little pyro. But before that, we need to see a Luke who is fully in his own as a Jedi, and this is our first look at that in
It's
canon.
true. Yeah,
And
absolutely.
it makes a great mirror of Din becoming a more complete person and no longer clinging to this false concept of what he thinks a Mandalorian should be, as
Right.
well as seeing Bo-Katan having to like, because right there at the end, we're now being introduced to the idea of, oh, Bo-Katan also has a religion, and she also needs to figure out how she's going to deal with it, interfacing with a dude who honestly doesn't want to have a laser sword fight with her.
Hmm. Right. Yeah.
So that's pretty cool. And then even Grogu. Look, I have been more vocal than anybody about my dislike of Grogu from day one. I get it. I'm a terrible human being. Whatever. Uh, but even Grogu gets a little bit of character development, which I was impressed with because, puppet.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. I think that the um, where you're talking about, I think maybe what I was a little surprised that this story arc was ended so finally. Maybe I'm just not used to seeing that in TV as much anymore. But we're now. I mean, it's a pretty hard stop on the Grogu Mando storyline. It's now they're going to be diverging. Even if we follow both of them, we'll be following kind of them separately. Um, if that is, and then that brings up the question, of course, which we will probably get into even more later on, which is what will happen in season 3. You know, we are now because look with our principal characters, right? With Din Djarin, with um, Boba Fett, Fennec Shand. Well, we sort of know where they kind of end up. But then with the other Mandalorians, Bo Katan, um, we're just leaving them on the bridge of that cruiser, right? With this seemingly, uh, weird uh, obstacle. But for, forget. Has everybody watched Rebel? Has people watched Rebels here? Sabine just gave the dark saber to her,
John,
right?
go ahead.
I was gonna say, I bet Jared and I have the same thought, and I had the same thought, and I spoke with some friends about it. Sabine found the saber,
Okay.
right? It was in Maul's possession, ostensibly, right? I mean, it was sitting in his hidey hole on uh Dathomir.
Yeah.
So they found it and just took it. So Sabine didn't have to fight anyone for it, didn't have to earn it, but she did. And that's the weird thing. It's like Kanan would say she earned the blade when when he taught her how to use it, right? And she got a handle on it. But she chose to give it up. So if you really want to like get really weird about it, is like technically like Obi-Wan is the ruler of Mandalore and he's dead, right? Because he's the last one to beat Maul. Right? I mean,
And
but Ahsoka beat him before that. So is Ahsoka the rightful ruler of Mandalore?
Right,
So
exactly. It's and so that's a direct reflection of what Din Djarin's dealing with, being a child of the Watch, because he also has just gone through this and is still going through this weird transformation where, oh wait, my beliefs don't match up with reality, but I still have ideals. So how do I have only a Sith deals in absolutes? Um, and I think that's what we're going to see on a larger scale now as we've explored this microcosmically in terms of just an individual character. So now how are the Mandalorians as a people going to have to face this issue down? uh I was very impressed with what they have done with Moff Gideon as a villain, uh because I think one of the most interesting and attractive things about the old Thrawn was his ability to glean out finer details of a foreign culture. Yes, Sith and armorers, that's true. And you know, it was great. Thrawn was like Professor Moriarty, as an Imperial leader, and so you see Moff Gideon like trying to ape that a little bit by knowing a whole lot of very odd information about Mandalorians, and he's sort of a failed Thrawn in that way, which I just love how he managed. He tries so hard to be Thrawn, and he can't quite pull it off, and it's great. Thrawn would have won that sword fight. Thrawn wouldn't have gotten into the sword fight.
Right. Yeah. True. Yeah. Yes. So another thing that I think is really probably one of the more popular things about the final season, but this whole season is Cara Dune, Fennec Shand, and Bo-Katan, and what's the other Mandalorian played by the wrestler? What's her name? I don't remember. And then what happened to the guy? Did he get off screen?
Good question. Apparently he's off doing Mandalorian things. Maybe he had to stay with their ship. I mean, that was, speaking of just random other awesomeness from the show. It's like, you know, Slave One comes flying in, goes to land, and it's like there's a couple of ships there, but boom, it's like there's a Mandalorian troop transport. It's like, that was awesome. You know, it's like you knew instantly what they were there for if you know what that ship is.
Yes.
You watch the Clone Wars and Rebels, you recognize that style of ship. That's a Mandalorian ship. So
yeah, no, I think for me, the Mandalorians are Bo-Katan and that crew have been some of the best parts about the season for me. I like how they're flushing out the Mandalorian culture. It's not even a monoculture. It's, you know, you've got different belief systems and all of that. But the subtle things that they do, like in this episode, you can see it when the four of them are going down the alley, and they say the really cliche, you know, it's all clear, too clear, you know. But what I liked about what they're kind of doing with Mandalorian culture is they're when Din Djarin like joins the four of them, or joins three of them, so the four of them go attack the ship or whatever, it's like they have battle strategies implanted in them culturally, where they don't even have to discuss it amongst themselves, right? They just kind of look at each other. When somebody sees the leader doing one thing, everybody knows what else to do. In the final episode, when they're on the thing, and they both simultaneously jump off of the platform to then, you know, come up, it's like without even thinking, they have all of these kind of plans like culturally imbued in them. And so even Din Djarin has these kind of things in them, so they can just join up with each other and work as these like really, you know, tight surgical teams.
Well, they're certainly, you know, it was the Mandalorian said in the first season, weapons are part of their religion. You know, I mean, they're kind of born warriors. And certainly, right, he was raised in the fighting pits. That was the other comment he mentioned. He was found by the Death Watch and raised in the fighting pits. So yeah, they're very interesting. It's neat to see, because Bo-Katan started as Death Watch, right?
Yep.
And we can assume that the Children of the Watch are an offshoot of that culturally, right? They're much more extreme, and they even mention that they're extremists.
Yeah.
There's even some hint in Rebels, a small bit when they go to recruit the Guardians of Concord Dawn, which was Fen Rao and his crew. They're derisive towards Sabine when they first see her, and they call her Death Watch, and she's like, "No, I'm not Death Watch. I never joined him. My mother was, but not me."
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, it's a very clear, you know, there's certainly various groups culturally that are very culturally distinct, and there's, you know, as you might expect, not a lot of love lost between them. So it'll be interesting to see what the third season holds, because right, a character development, crisis of faith, all these things are kind of laid out there, and it's like, in the next season, how does Din deal with his? Now he has the dark saber. Does he have to be a leader? Does he want to be a leader? Right? What does he do now? Does he go back to bounty hunting? Does he help on the crusade? How does Bo-Katan deal with, right, the not having her saber to show that she's the heir? Can she get around it? Will the Mandalorians accept her beyond that? Oh, and I can't wait for the inevitable battle between her and the armor. I mean, that's, you know, even if it's just a battle of words, it could be very interesting, you know, to see their two philosophies really grind on each other, especially considering that she was at one point Death Watch.
Yeah. And, you know, we know that the armorer is more than likely a Mandalorian because she's got the horns on her head, right? So, you know, Bo-Katan and the armorer are obviously coming from some common place. It will definitely be seen. I like I said, Bo-Katan is one of my favorite characters of the season, mostly because she's not nice. You know, it's like we've got many characters who are, you know, trying to grease the wheels and stuff, and she doesn't seem to care for. She doesn't give a shit.
And another interesting point, right, going into the next season, and then we'll. And then I'll stop talking about next season. Is Din stuck? He ain't got a ship.
Right.
So I was thinking about that too. He's stuck in the van of his friend's friend, bumming a ride to a concert he never wanted to go to, and has absolutely no way home.
Right. And he has the tickets.
Right. He has the ticket. Like, he's the only guy who can get them in, and he doesn't even like this band.
Right. Exactly.
Yes, that he's set up for an interesting situation. I think it's going to open up a lot in the next season in terms of exploring like Mandalorian culture, learning more about them. I think that's going to be probably Dave Filoni's baby for a while. But at the same time, everybody's parting ways. Like Cara Dune, who, by the way, I think she got one of the shining moments of the episode. Where she's trying to get her railgun to work and it's not.
Yeah.
And she's covered by Fennec Shan of all people, who, you know, no love lost there. And that works out. And then, you know, she just starts blazing people down. Man, I like that character.
Yeah.
I had heard a rumor, and it is just a rumor, unsubstantiated, so I don't know if I should say it, but that it's quite possible that the announced Rangers or Marshals of the thing is that Marshals of the New Republic is going to be about her.
I think she seems to be playing a prominent role, but it's her and the Rangers who are in the X-Wings, and I imagine a few others. I'm hoping it's going to be a little bit more of an ensemble deal. I'm not, because Gina Carano can't carry a series on her own. She makes an excellent secondary character.
Yeah. Which is really strange. I am in agreement, but which is really strange because, like, I remember like her first big movie, Haywire, and I remember thinking she was amazing in it. And I don't know if it was just a different director or if it was an action movie, so I wasn't expecting much. I don't know, but yeah, I agree.
Okay, just so long as the Dwayne Johnson thing is okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
It has been a long time since I've seen it. So
I do want to mention one thing. I don't want to bring up any of the stupid, dumb complaints that people have had. But one thing about the age, everybody's trying to figure out, especially when Bo-Katan was there, everybody's trying to figure out her age. I just want to point out that Ming-Na Wen is 57 years old. That's pretty, so...
Does she sleep in Tupperware?
I know. It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. But yeah, she is 57 years old. So, Bo-Katan could easily be 50, and everything is. I mean, Katie Sackhoff is 40 herself, so.
These people all have a Lazarus pit in their basements.
Well, they all have personal trainers and dietitians. And stuff
that's
like
true,
that.
and
Controlling
Disney
it.
is
And makeup artists.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, right. Yeah, there you go.
That's true. And CGI that works astonishingly well. I was impressed. I mean, you can tell that it was CGI, but it still looked like a young Mark Hamill.
Oh, I thought you were going to talk about R2.
Now, I was trying to make a smooth
Pulls his
segue.
wheel up, right?
The R2 was great. R2, that ending, I even have it written down in my notes right here. That was the most Star Warsy feeling I have gotten from this series so far. Good golly, did that feel like the end of a Star Wars movie?
So, do we think that? And here's a question for everybody. I want everybody to chime in here. Do we think that Gogru knows R2? Because, quite frankly, R2 is probably the only person outside of Anakin that knew when Anakin fell and could have went, oh, I better go grab the kid. I mean, I don't think anybody else.
Since R2 was there for all of Clone Wars and, Grogu was up during that time, it's entirely possible they know each other at least in passing.
Yeah, so I would be interested to see what they're having R2 say to him, because I know people put lines to all those beeps and stuff like that. So,
well, it harkens back. I thought at the time, and I need to watch it again, but I still think this is true. In one of the early drafts of Star Wars, George Lucas had R2 telling the story, and that he has been present for all of it. And that idea never really went away. He and 3PO show up time and again. And I think Filoni, as the heir to the camera, is trying to keep that going. It's entirely possible, but it raises questions for me, as have many things in this season. Just how sentient is that little turd? I mean, we know he's 50, but he's Yoda 50. And apparently that means he looks like an infant. He doesn't communicate, but then again, neither does Din very much. So it's impossible for me to suss out how cognizant is the kid? Is the kid a kid? Is he trolling everybody right now?
Well, I kind of see it like this way, because he is 50 years old. So that brings up a good point. Are they like an infant for 20 years where they are literally dependent on somebody else for that? I don't know. I kind of think of it as maybe they start out kind of almost like, in a weird way, autistic, where they're or kind of reversed, where they cannot communicate, right? They don't possess that connection to the outside world, but they're observing that whole time. And that could also explain the kind of wisdom that species is, known for, to where maybe they don't become communicative for 100 years or so. Maybe they're kind of mute, and they're just kind of like an observer for a certain amount of time in their development, and then they develop, because Yoda doesn't speak well anyway. Right? Maybe they never speak. Maybe they don't speak until like way, way, way back. And even then it gives them trouble. So I don't know.
It's right. So I think trying to put logic to it is, I think it's a storytelling device. True. Right? That he can't speak. But Ahsoka makes it very clear that, right, he was trained, and that was 29 years ago.
Right.
He had been trained to use the Force,
right,
which would have put him at like 21. So old enough to drink, not old enough to walk around, right? So that makes a really interesting and weird thing, right? If he, and how long had he been there, given his species? But I do, to the earlier point about R2, he absolutely totally knew R2, whether R2 is the one that saved him, which is a possibility, but R2, right, kind of really wasn't present. It's hard to, we don't really know where R2 was. So, no, R2 was with Padme, right? When the temple fell.
Was he?
Yeah, he dropped him off. I don't remember. At any rate, no, I take that back. I'm misremembering the order, but
he may have been with Obi-Wan. I can't remember.
Because when he came to Padme after the temple fell, R2 was with him, and he was going to deal with the Separatists. That's the only thing I remember. I don't know where R2 actually was when he attacked the temple.
Either way, R2 wasn't in the temple.
Yeah. But he definitely, I think certainly they recognized each other. I think that was very, at least my impression was that was the intention of their exchange.
It seemed like it, yeah.
And that he regarded Din as, I mean, yeah, we've got the whole father-son thing going on, but he regarded Din with more reverence. I don't know if that's the word I want to use there. He was treating him more as a master than a father at the end, and that I find intriguing. I have more questions than answers, as does everyone after this episode.
Definitely more questions than answers.
Yeah.
But, you know, something that we can analyze with the knowledge present, Luke fought that entire battle with his hood up.
Yeah.
It's not easy.
Other than plot purposes, who's the mysterious Jedi with the green lightsaber and the one-gloved hand who is not Michael Jackson?
It's called saving on an effects budget.
Yeah.
But what?
Because
why
they don't have to do anything to his face.
I mean, yes, I get that, but why pragmatically would a Jedi want to fight with his hood up like that?
They don't need to look because they can use the Force and it looks spooky.
And
would he be more effective that way?
I don't know.
Not against droids. They're probably who knows? Maybe droids track eye movement. But he might have also just invested in a bunch of bobby pins sewn into the hood to keep, because that's the only way to keep those things up that long.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
But for the casual fan, right, we're the exception, right? It's like the minute she said one X-wing, it's like two heartbeats later, it's like, oh, right. My wife, right, a much more casual fan, who's been very taken in by it, and of course knows who Luke is, didn't realize, right, until like kind of after, like even after the green lightsaber was shown, she was kind of really just dawning on her there's only one person it could be, and she was expecting the subversion of her expectations that it would be Luke, right? But and she didn't make the immediate thing. It's like, oh, it's a cloaked figure in an X-wing. Well, there's only one person it can be. So for the casual fan, rather than us, super nerds, it's, it was a little bit of a reveal and a moment of like, well, who could it be? It's like, it's a cloaked figure. Is it Ahsoka? Right? It might be Ahsoka. Right. Maybe she decided to answer it after all this time and she's going to come back, or maybe it's somebody else. And no, it's Luke, right? Oh, yay, Right. So I think that had something to do with it. Whereas if even the casual fan saw, a blonde CGI young Mark Hamill, it'd have been pretty instantaneous, which means they just would have had like a less fight scene, because it's less tension building. But I think it worked pretty well. But yeah, the hood, that's hard. I tried that in a LARP once.
The whole fight scene, yeah, he had his hood down, but it absolutely parallels Rogue One, where his father walks down a hallway and clears everything out of the way. The hallway scenes for Star Wars overall are really telling of that character, of that level of power, because you have Boba Fett's entrance where he gets his armor, or even before he gets his armor, where he takes a gaffy stick and he's laying waste to stormtroopers. That's great. Then they introduce the Dark Trooper and show just how terrifying it is. And we're going to talk a moment about Beskar armor and punching it, 20 times in a row and it doesn't dent, but a blast door does. But you see how terrible a Dark Trooper is. and then a lone figure comes through and clears the hallway of the dark troopers that are on this level instead of this level of capability. And it just sets a whole new precedent for what you're expecting now.
It's a very good point. I think in general, you're right. The combat in this episode, maybe more so than the rest of the season, really told who these characters are.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
definitely.
And it's a little bit freaky. Calling back to another movie, the Vader hallway scene in Rogue One, where he's, I mean, that's the closest Star Wars comes to a horror movie.
Well, I think that the Luke coming out of the elevator, and that scene right there was 100% supposed to echo Rogue One. That was obvious, I think, because I mean it was framed kind of the same way. They had the same kind of camera tracks. It was definitely, and it kind of served the same purpose of like, now we get to see Luke kind of do what we know, should be,
It's odd to see Luke in his prime, because we've never really seen him do that before. And there's a little bit of a spookiness to it. Is there a
Episode 6, when he walks in, his introduction, what he does to the Gamorreans is exactly that hooded, dark, who is that? That's not the farm boy that we all knew. This is a dark clad figure, which Vader wears the dark, and we're seeing that again. So it's a reintroduction of that Luke, a matured version of it. That's how I thought of it anyway.
Oh, that's a great point.
That dark entrance before, using a force power that was associated with the dark side too. So
we get a chance to parallel, put side by side Ahsoka and Luke, two characters that when shown in their introductions, they're ghosting people. That's just what it is. For Luke, he's plowing through very slow, very methodical, and nothing can touch him. For Ahsoka, she's vanishing in the mist. She's coming up behind her opponents and whatever. But you're seeing two Jedi of varying levels of capability in what they're good at. She's very fast, very spry.
And Luke knows how to make an entrance.
And Luke knows how to. He's definitely a drama queen like his dad. But he just comes through and very rancor, just right through everything.
This is a good point.
So to the casual fan, even my wife, who understands the time period and thing, she turned around and she's like, "Is that Anakin?" Because of how much more aggressive Luke was, right? Than we've seen him, right? And then like you take a second and think, it's like, well, he went, rancor on Vader right at the end, right? I mean, that's certainly within Luke's realm is anger, right? I mean, that's probably, to put it in game terms, that's his flaw, right? He's angry, right? That's a problem the Skywalkers tend to have. Yeah. And in this, it's like my first thought seeing Luke's entrance was, that's cool, but that's not how Luke fought. But it's 5 years later. Luke's had plenty of time to like totally actually learn how to lightsaber fight, right? That's the other thing is like Luke, Mark Hamill was baseball bat swinging on the set. I mean, his technique in Return of the Jedi was okay at best, but it's what they had at the time. Now, martial arts in movies is much different, especially when you're just swinging at air or guys in blue suits,
Unless you're Moff Gideon.
He didn't even finish his Yoda training.
Right.
He went off early. That was the point. Anyway, yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I love the documentary about Mark Hamill when he did 5 and 6 about how he went to go train Kendo and he worked hard for that. And when we were watching the episode last night, Deso and I, immediately after the episode ended, and he was done yelling about it, we both agreed that's Form 1. A lot of his movements, I was seeing it play out in my head. I like the lightsaber combat in The Mandalorian this season because it's a combination of how people like the new edgy lightsaber work, but it goes back to the basics. Not everything needs jumps and flips, and it doesn't have to be flashy. It can be quick and precise. I was able to identify a lot of the movements he was doing in that hallway instead of it going, wait a second, why is Luke doing Form 4 when that wasn't his thing? It was him in his prime, and I liked that.
Absolutely. And like I said, it's been years, right? It's been 5 years. And Luke's hadn't, I mean, he's, in all the canon material we have, he has nothing to do with the formation of the New Republic, right? He totally steps out. He's like, I got Jedi business to deal with. And he's like, I'm out. And he goes hunting for Jedi artifacts and finding things. And that makes total sense. That's what he's been doing. Jedi stuff for 5 years. That's a long time for somebody that's really dedicated to learn a great deal of mystic and physical arts.
In a vehicle he personally chose to requisition from the government, by the way.
Right. That vehicle was awarded to him for saving the princess.
The government doesn't just hand over Humvees, sir.
They weren't a government when they did it, though.
They weren't a government when they did it. That's right.
It has lasers on it. It fires torpedoes. He's
so does the Falcon
around a tank. Okay, but the Falcon is illegal for a number of reasons.
Well, that's okay. A bad example. And it's more like an F-16 or probably an F-14, realistically. You know, I mean,
that's true. So it was cool stylistically. Stylistically, it was an interesting choice to juxtapose, and that's a great point. That was totally Form 1. I agree. Luke being totally competent with his saber, followed, shortly enough after that miserable. I'm never going to stop harping on how crappy Moff Gideon is with a sword. There we go. But he almost looks like he's trying to mimic Form 1, right? Like he's doing big baseball swings, but he has no control over the blade.
Gideon was just trying to power through without the training that goes with lightsaber or with Jedi. He was just using it like a hacking weapon, trying to blow through Beskar.
It makes me think of the people who think they know what they're doing and just swing it around. And he's a great representation of that.
So what he really is a great representation of a like year 2 student in swordsmanship. Like they've got kind of just enough, but maybe a 6-month student. It'd be a little bit more fair. Sorry, Jared.
I'm gonna go more with like he's somebody who learned from YouTube videos only and had no feedback. No. There's a difference. You can totally learn from YouTube videos. That is a totally legitimate and important tool. No feedback is the problem.
That's true.
Right?
Or just
karate from book.
No. He's one of those guys that comments on the videos. You're doing it wrong.
You're doing it wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Here's a video.
That's not Form 2.
Here's a video of me swinging a saber.
He's an entire comment section of 14-year-olds rolled into one.
But here's the point. Like, I appreciate that bit of it, right? Like when I look back at the original movies, the original trilogy or whatever. When I was a kid, I was a little disappointed the sword play wasn't better. But looking back on it now, I'm kind of glad it wasn't, because those weapons had been out of vogue for so long. Who the hell knows how to use them, all that kind of thing. So that makes sense. The same thing with Moff Gideon. Where would he have learned how to competently use a sword, right?
That's what I'm saying. He has no idea what he's doing. But Giancarlo Esposito, in the build-up to this, in the interviews, he's saying, oh, Moff Gideon's solid. He's been training. He knows how to use it. No, you don't. I think maybe the choreographer knew more about that character than he did in that way.
I think.
But that's what you want the character to believe about their skills.
This is a good point.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, whenever you give anybody a weapon, they are a danger and a hazard. And I think that's really what they were just trying to get across. While he had no idea how to use the lightsaber as a lightsaber, he used it as a long machete and just was hacking and
as a weapon. Therefore, he is a threat.
He was still a danger and needed to be dealt with. And I think, given that, Din Djarin and Moff Gideon were well paired off in that regard. If you were to pit him against Ahsoka or Luke or anybody that had any iota of understanding on the use of a lightsaber, of course he's going to have no chance, but he's still a fighter. He's still a threat in that regard.
So I kind of saw it, and maybe it's just how I view some things. Early, or about the mid-season, Din Djarin told his game master, I'm going to pick up melee, and I'm going to start picking up some skills to use melee. So because I want to switch, instead of being a gunslinger and a guy with all the gadgets, I'm going to get a melee weapon. And I think that'll be really good because there's Jedi with lightsabers and stuff running around, so I need to be prepared. And the game master was like, all right, fine. I'll give you a Beskar spear. So now you have the spear. And it's like, well, now I got to have a bad guy for him, but he can't be too good at lightsaber fighting because he'll kick his butt. So, it's got to make the threat equal. So to his ability to hand to hand. What was that?
Where was the spear? The whole
Did
time?
I miss it? Was it on his back? Does
it
he had it on
it fell on the ground.
So I missed it, and it was just where did it go?
It
Where
suddenly
did it come
appeared
from?
when the Dark Trooper was a serious threat. It's I need this.
I have a reason to watch it again, though.
Yeah.
So
it fell on the ground, and if you look, he basically he somersaults back over it, grabs it at the same time, and
don't
comes
tell me I
up
need
with
to watch it again.
Okay.
Give me a reason to watch it again.
Retro
for most of the show, he's wearing it mounted to his backpack, so it goes right along his side.
But then, because of going through the whole episode, my brain just erased it because it was it's a shiny object that's a background detail, but then it's suddenly in his hand in my memory, so I'm just going to watch it again.
Yeah.
It's like the weapons version of Gene's guy.
Yeah, right.
It showed up right when it saved his back, literally, but yeah, you're right, it disappeared. And at no point did walking through a spaceship he run into the issue of not being able to fit that 6-foot metal pole on his back through the doorway, which any cosplayer or person who works with pole arms is going to know is a common issue.
I was just going to say, and I'm sure his game master pointed that out, and he pointed out he's got plenty of encumbrance, so it's not a problem. One more weapon, no problem.
So, hey, speaking of melee combat, Tamura Morrison, man, that dude's been training.
Oh, dude. Yeah, no, Tamura Morrison's is rugged as all hell.
I am impressed.
I got a couple of Maori friends, and they're a tough breed already. But yeah, Tamura Morrison. Did you guys ever see the movie Once Were Warriors?
Yes. Yeah, that's a good movie. Excellent elucidation. Yeah.
And Tamura Morrison should have won an Oscar for that role. I mean, he was amazing in that role. It's not an easy movie to watch because he plays an abusive father. But he plays it, and this is, I think, he brings this to the Boba Fett character, is he plays the abusive father very, very well, because for so much of the movie he's very likable, right? He's not always just bad, and he has a very good way of going between these two states and making it believable. And like when he shows up in the tragedy, which I have to say, I kind of feel like that's my favorite episode of the whole season. Even though it's the shortest, it's so tight. It's just like dialed in right in there. And, again, Tamura Morrison's just amazing. One of my favorite actors. But yeah, that what people call the old man strength,
it's a real thing.
Yeah, absolutely. You can't go through that. And, you know, I like seeing some of the Maori stick fighting with the gaffy stick. That was pretty cool.
I'm hoping we'll later on, and this brings me up to another point I wanted to discuss. I'm hoping later on we'll see some flashbacks to his time training with the Tusken Raiders, where he learns how to use that thing. Because, man, would that make an excellent plot point. But that ending, the ending, you know, after the credits,
Yeah.
did anyone else? Is anyone else a gigantic mark for Conan the Barbarian and get that vibe?
Yeah.
Because my gosh, that looked like the cover of a Conan novel. And he, you know, I'm trying to remember.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
What is it Subutai says in the opening to the film? Who would wear the Iron Crown by his own hand?
Yes, that was actually Mako. It was Mako's character.
His character's name is Subutai.
No, Subutai is the saber
archer,
guy.
George Lopez.
Yeah.
You sure?
Yeah,
Yep.
Pretty sure. Yeah, archer and thief. It's hard because I've read like all of the Conan short stories like 17 times.
Yeah, so have I.
And I've read the things, and like those characters are like kind of not in there. So
yeah, no, same here. I've held the original Robert Howard manuscripts in my hands because I went to school where they had his archive. It's pretty awesome.
That's cool.
That's awesome. But yes, absolutely. I mean, that was exactly that image. I mean, even to the point of he sets his carbine down, right where the sword is laying against the thing, you know, and then it's the end of the throne has the two rancor. It's great.
Fennec Shand coming up and sitting on there with the jug of spotchka. That's
and Bib Fortuna is turning into Jabba. That's great.
Yeah, he's all fat. And I like how the tree like get fat in the tentacles.
So continuity error, right? So long in canon, they've said that Bib Fortuna's penalty was for letting Luke in was he wasn't allowed to go. This was something that circled that I know I've read. But there's a scene in Return of the Jedi where he's looking out the window. And then I remember reading somewhere else that, he had a speeder bike. So as soon as stuff started going sideways, he split right in the back of the sail barge, right? He took off. But in the Chuck Wendig novels, they make a strong point that like nobody comes to take over. And that like Maliki the Rancor, you know, it's like people just leave because nobody comes to take over. And then the mining guild kind of tries to move in, and then you get Cobb Vant's story. So it's interesting that 5 years later, it's like, you know, continuity error. Bib Fortuna has been trying to run things, and maybe he's just doing a bad job. And that's why people...
I mean, it wasn't a crowded palace. There's every chance he just came back right then, and it's all such minutiae of timing.
Yeah.
That I don't know that we need to chalk it up to. It's not the same as like, we changed Ahsoka's lightsaber color. Like that's notable, you know.
So super chat to the rescue. Tren Wilson says Mako played Akiro the Wizard.
Thank you.
I
need to watch that movie again. I haven't seen that in forever.
Oh, I watched that like at least twice a year. That movie is so fun.
I love that movie.
I mean, there's so many ridiculous things about it, but
all the best one-liners though.
Yeah.
Are the gods going to help? No, then tell them to stay out of the way.
Yeah, I like the sound effects of Arnold just going that they put over the fight sequences.
Contemplate your iniquities on the tree of woe.
Yes. Anyway, so yes, the Book of Boba Fett coming soon. Do we think that's the season 3 of The Mandalorian, or do we think it's a separate series?
I'm calling separate series. That's what I think. But
it was listed as its own series, but it's kind of weird that it's coming out in December, which is also when the new season of Mandalorian is coming out.
Yeah, that's what I think. That's why people are speculating this.
It's I looked it up like just a moment ago.
What if they're going to run them in tandem, like as tandem shows, so that they have to check in with, like, back in the 90s, anybody else grew up watching Walker, Texas Ranger? There was a Walker spin-off called Sons of Thunder. And the only reason those shows, like the only reason that show survived the like 4 episodes that it did was because every other episode had a cross thing with Walker and the rest of the Rangers. I could see them doing that. Not, I mean, if anybody can carry a series, it's Tamura Morrison.
Classic comic book, right? It's like, oh, this comic book's not doing good. What do we do? Hey, let's do a crossover with the Punisher, because
it's new Arrowverse,
right? New Arrowverse, yeah, exactly. It's I wouldn't be surprised, and it makes total sense they didn't announce it, right? When they announced all the other shows, right? That's very obvious. They couldn't have done it. It would have totally ruined the surprise at the end.
I really thought when it showed up at the end credit scene exactly what was said, that it's the announcement for what the new season was going to be. But when I just looked it up, it's slated as a new series. So, but that could still be what they're reporting and not 100% correct.
Time will tell.
Yeah, where is it being listed? Is it on the Disney site?
Hold on, let me find where I was at.
Because I was not able to get any clear answer on whether it's.
So I found this is on Deadline.
Yeah, I don't know how much I.
Yeah, I'm looking up different. Of course, it freezes. Bear witness.
Yeah, I've got it here. Yeah, but I don't think we had any official word from Lucasfilm on what exactly it's going to be. I mean, it could be a limited series like Obi-Wan, where it's just like one season,
which would be great.
It could be a movie. Could be a movie that they're making for Disney Plus.
That would be all. You know, I mean, it's great. The thing is, there's so much with the announcement. There's so many things coming out, and it's going to take a few years for these things to get going. But like we have assuming we have at least a 3rd season of Mandalorian, right? Which I guess is already in production. I remember reading somewhere. I don't know how confirmed that is. And then we know that Andor started. Kenobi's beginning, right? They're getting there. We've heard reports, so we can expect certainly to see the Mandalorian. Hopefully, a separate show that runs in tandem, which would be great. Or possibly, right? They said December, right? So maybe Mandalorian will be 8 episodes and will end, and the next Friday we'll get our first episode of the Book of Boba, and that'll carry us through, right? Maybe another month, which would be great. What a way to get into 2022.
Well, they would have to be playing at the same time a little bit, because these are 8 episodes. So it's like, and I know Mando is supposed to come out December next year as well.
Christmas Day. But they could start at the beginning. Yeah, they could start at the beginning of December for the Book of Boba, and kind of like wet your whistle, prepare you a little bit, prime you for the Mandalorian coming out on Christmas.
Or maybe maybe the Book of Boba sets up some very important issues between Bo-Katan, the rest of the Mandalorians, and Boba's new criminal empire.
Everything I'm looking up says that it's going to be its own series.
Yeah, it would be very exciting.
In any event, we have a lot of Star Wars to look forward to.
Yeah.
So we are almost certainly going to be getting a closer look at Mandalorians and their culture and whatever the Empire did to Mandalore.
Yes.
This is starting to remind me of I don't know if anybody else got these vibes. When the British took over India, they followed what seems to be a very similar pattern, and I'm wondering if that might indicate what we can expect to see of the remnants of Mandalore. Taking over the culture insidiously, like partway from the inside, manipulating the caste system, which has a complicated history that changed when the British came in, playing the great game with Russia, which could be using Mandalore as a sort of proxy location to fight with the New Republic. I think there are a lot of possibilities here that, from a cultural standpoint, could be really interesting to watch.
Yeah. And Boba Fett mentions that the Empire turned that planet to glass, kind of echoing what happened to Tatooine.
And Mayfield also makes the comment that is like, well, I'm just saying, if you're from Alderaan, you believe one thing, you believe in Mandalore, you believe another thing, and it don't matter because neither of them exist anymore.
Right. So, does Concordia even exist? I mean, they have moons, so the planet can be dead, and you still have the moons that Death Watch used to camp out on.
It certainly will be interesting, because we also know that from Rebels that Gar Saxon took a group of Mandalorians to the Empire to become commandos. Sabine herself studied at the Imperial Academy and helped them design weapons. It's so yeah, there's a lot of interesting
possibilities.
Yeah, with the cultural takeover and how they dealt with it.
Go ahead.
Well, I'm wondering what the implications then are for the totally sweet combat scenes that we're going to be getting.
Oh yeah.
Because
I can't wait. I want to see if you've watched the Clone Wars all the way through, in the later seasons, they start to have these ray bucklers, right? I would love to see those start getting into live action, because those could yield some pretty sweet effects.
I need more Gamorrean Fight Club. Definitely need more of that, and more of that was straight up classical old fashioned Japanese jujitsu, which with
vibro axes. Yeah.
With vibro axes. Well, and later on Tamura Morrison's use of joint manipulation. These techniques show up in all kinds of martial arts. I don't know who was doing the choreography on this one, but that looks like the years of training I've had, made for screen purposes. But this presents a lot of possibilities for those of us who are into the combining of fantasy with actually hitting people.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Terrace Kasi. I love the way that we were talking about this last week, the Mandalorian using his armor as the weapon. Great stuff.
It's also a great scene in the last episode when they're on top of the Juggernaut, where the Mandalorian uses a hijiate, an arm elbow arm throw, shoulder elbow joint lock, to throw one of the pirates right off the thing. And in this episode, there's a classic, another joint manipulation throw that Bo-Katan does against one of the stormtroopers. And it's, punching people in armor, at least in our world, doesn't work real well unless you got really big gauntlets on. So the martial art of armored warriors is joint locking, and especially in Japan, where they had softer armor. That's why Aikijitsu, which became modern Jiu-Jitsu, and Aikido and modern Aikijitsu, was the weapon, was the hand-to-hand of samurai. Because if they were in armor on the battlefield and you lose your sword, punching somebody in the chest that's wearing its suit of armor doesn't do much.
No.
But you can throw them and break their neck.
Although historical point, it's usually you're rarely going to see the term jujitsu or any derivative of it used in historical documents.
Right.
Usually they were phrases like koshi no mowari, or occasionally yawara or something like that, to differentiate. But the Aiki Jujutsu was Takeda Sokaku didn't bring that in until he sort of reinvented a martial art that used to exist. which is maybe the single most successful historical example ever of a guy learning a martial art from a book and actually having it work.
Right.
But he had a lot of unfortunate students along the way who helped out.
Right. I think another great aspect of the fighting. Number one, you have people like Gina Carrera who are actual fighters, right? So you're never going to get the Angelina Jolie effect of like, she can't hold that gun, where like you can see the actor is really struggling with the physicality of whatever action scene they're doing, right? It happens a lot on TV where they can't afford a lot of doubles or whatever. But so you have people like that, Ming Na Wen, who does her own stunts a lot of times, and then
Sasha
of course
Banks.
you have what?
Sasha Banks. That's the other Mandalorian.
Right. Yeah. Right. Do we know what her name was in the show yet?
I don't remember.
Okay.
Right.
Yes, but yeah. So she's from WWE, right? And then the Moff Gideon's assistant on the thing, she's an MMA fighter, even though she doesn't fight at all. That seems like a waste. I was hoping she was going to get a fight sequence, but anyway. So you have a lot of this stuff, so you're getting a lot of this really good, visceral, realistic, thing where the actors are in it. They don't need to be doubled as much, whatever. Katie Sackhoff did an amazing job translating a lot of the movement from Clone Wars and Rebels. Like when she puts on her helmet and takes out her guns, it's perfect. But the action, like you said, the use of joint locks, even like with the Boba Fett, where he's fighting the stormtroopers and he's using that armor to, throw them, and when he picks that one guy up by the mask.
Well, it's impressive to see how well thought out not just the fighting, but all of their physical actions are.
Yeah.
Oh, thanks, John found it. Cosca Reeves. But like, for instance, when Din in the previous episode, Din has to take off his helmet, right, to interface with the computer for no apparent or discernible good reason.
Yes, I saw that. Did you see the meme? It said, "Congratulations, you have a face. That's all we were checking for here. Have access to all of this sensitive data."
Apparently, well, maybe the Imperials all really do look the same. So he has to take off the helmet, but when he's moving, he moves as if he has always worn a helmet, doesn't know any other way. Yeah. And that sort of like Bigfoot, Sasquatch-esque shoulder carriage all as a single unit deal. Somebody thought about that. And I don't know if that was if that was him or if there was a choreographer, but somebody was thoughtful enough to sit down and say, now wait a minute, here's his habitual motion pattern. And if we get to keep that going, I am exceptionally pleased with how this seems to be shaping up. Also, the legendary wrestler Cody Rhodes recently expressed interest in being involved in further Disney Plus projects. I hope to all goodness that more and more pro wrestlers become involved in this stuff, because no one understands action design like they do.
Right. Yeah.
Also, Cody Rhodes is awesome.
The other thing, like you said about action, not about physical action, but like last episode when Cara Dune and Fennec Shan are providing sniper support for their escape, right? And how tight that was. And it's like I said, I mean I'm not talking from any type of actual experience, but it played out very, very realistic. They were communicating with each other. They're obviously, like, Fennec Shan's a sharpshooter, Cara Dune's a shock trooper. You got a lot of that expertise coming through, and they're able to kind of size up this whole thing from a long way away, tell each other where everything is, divide labor, all of that stuff. So, I mean, I thought that the inclusion of all of that kind of thing, and the way that you have, like I said, when she and Boba Fett are working together, where they're just two professionals, and it's a totally different relationship than the bounty hunter rabble that you see in the first season.
Yeah, that's a great contrast, right? It's like, it's like all these guys, they're all super dangerous, but they're all solo acts or pairs, right? And that's that's why the Mandalorian himself, by himself, was able to kind of keep them back, right? And then they didn't stand a chance when the Mandalorians as a cohesive unit, counterattacked. It's like there was nothing, right? They couldn't do anything. So, and that's a really interesting counterpoint, and that's to an extent, right? You imagine that's how the Empire was a danger, right? They were the super powerful military force that was everywhere, and right, the original trilogy leads us to believe that it's only these plucky heroes that are, extraordinary, that can do it. But when you take people that are more ordinary, but they work really well together, right, and then you get good directors that know how to do the action right, and that's because there's doing action wrong, right? There's plenty of movies where you're like, oh, this is going to be great, and it's bad. The 80s is full of it, but it goes back further, and you can even take some really amazing actors and some really iconic roles. I'm gonna throw this out there. I fell asleep during the sword fights in the Musashi trilogy, right, with Toshiro Mifune, right, because the action just wasn't good. It didn't keep going, and you and I we've had a talk about kung fu movies that kind of do the same thing, right? The fist fights go on for like 10 seconds, right, and then the sword fights go on for 6 hours. It's like, and then it's at a certain point the choreography is just too much. Whereas like when you break it down into these tight little 30-minute, 45-minute episodes, and they pack all that action in to a couple of minutes, and it's just really well shot, really well produced. It gives you that thrill we want from action movies, and it keeps it from being too long, like me talking.
That being said, I mean, you've got the whole point of a choreography or a fight in a show is to tell a story. If you take the story of Din Djarin from season 1 to the end of season 2, you start off with somebody who is scary in the very first 3 minutes of the first episode, but he's lithe, he's quick. Yes, he's wearing armor, but he doesn't rely on his armor. That's his mask to hide. After his battle with the Mudhorn and he has to get new armor made, he starts losing that litheness, that quickness, and he becomes more of a tank, more of a battering ram almost, up through season 2, episode 7, where he takes that armor off. The whole time he's being shot, and he's just like, oh, I got hit. When he takes off that armor and he puts on the armor from the Imperial, and he's doing it to still hide his face, he's still trying to fight like a tank, but he almost loses his arm. It almost shatters his forearm because he goes to block, and that armor is just plastic, and it's telling his story, how he's come up through that point, and now, oh crap, I have to go back to my season 1 self just to survive in this armor, just to get out of here. And then when you come to this last episode, the one last thing I want to bring up is I could watch Boba Fett fly across a restaurant all day as long as we get a flamethrower off to keep them at bay from each other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that part in the last episode, in the tank episode, where he reflexively goes to block a blow coming in with his forearm, and the crappy stormtrooper armor that does nothing just shatters, right? And he goes, so I thought that was a very nice thing. They're really, really taking the piss on stormtroopers in this series. I mean, they are being portrayed they're really leaning into that ineptitude there. Like even during the cool scene where they're on the speeder bikes and they jump off the cliff and they come down, one of them has to hit a rock and then go spinning off and hit another one, right? It's like they can't do anything just right. They're always screwing up. And then the guy Mandalorian who disappears, you know,
X.
yes, he can't hit the side of a bantha.
Yes, right. I mean, stormtroopers are always kind of portrayed like that. However, right, this is 5 years on. It's like we're talking about the dregs, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's probably not a whole lot of recruitment drive going, and I'm sure they've lost a lot of their training facilities, so they're working with what they got. So you got to, you know.
Yeah, and even at their height, they weren't.
But also, right, another interesting thing about the last episode, and if you guys covered this last week and I wasn't here, I apologize for bringing it back up. But as the whole, we really see a bit of humanization of those stormtroopers.
Yeah.
Right, when they've got their helmets off and they're cheering, you know, and they're trying to do what they can, and you know they're still dealing with pirates and stuff, and they're understaffed, and you know now the roles are reversed. They're the rebels, right? They're trying to scrape by. So I thought that was very interesting. I also thought it was really cool that there were shore troopers, or coastal defense troopers, or apparently tropical troopers, whatever we're calling them now, because that was a neat nod to other stuff. But
yeah,
I thought it was really good. So the Mandalorian, Din, in this season, right, has had quite the journey. But I thought it was also very interesting that we saw a great deal of journey continued for the other characters. And like we've discussed earlier, this is probably set up for continuing stuff, right? But not just Boba and bringing back Fennec, bringing in Boba and bringing back Fennec, but we got continue. Not a lot of character development from Cara Dune, a little bit, with her like moving on and becoming the Marshal and clearly agreeing to help the New Republic bring order, because she's wearing the badge as a belt buckle now, because apparently it's Space Texas, so that's cool. But that they continue to bring up Alderaan. You know, I thought that was really interesting, and like I said, it's probably hopefully going to lead into maybe a little bit more character development for her, but Mayfield, I mean, talk about character development, you know. From a throwaway bad guy, you know, I thought that was really well done, and I look to see him show up in Boba Fett's employ in the future.
Yes. And he has. There are some great lines in there. I mentioned to Jared, I love the fact that when they're putting on the uniforms, he's like, "Oh my God, this guy reeks. His gloves are still wet." You know, it's just like.
Which anybody who's worn one of those get-ups knows you don't want to wear somebody else's armor.
Yeah, no, he had some of the good lines. Boba Fett had some good lines too. You know, Fett. Let's just say they might recognize my face.
You know, I really adored the subtlety of the jokes about the clones.
Yes.
Like they didn't make it too big of a deal, but you know, Bo-Katan giving him a hard time about it. And
that was so great.
So good.
In fact, I loved the return of Bo-Katan, because instead of like being like, "Oh, hey, how you doing?" Sure, you know, all that kind of stuff. She's like, "I get lost." You know what I mean? You know, and then he's like,
"Your father, don't you mean your donor?"
When he speaks, he says, "We don't need these guys." You know, she immediately is like, "What?" Like, you're
got that pride.
You know,
It's great. You know, honestly, I've never been a Boba Fett fan before, but I totally am behind him after this series.
Yeah. Boba Fett's, everybody's a fan of Boba Fett for the figure. I mean, that's how he got. That's how it's true, because before he ever appeared in any of the films, everybody was sending away for that little figure, and
Well, plus he had the best bit in the holiday special.
For those who saw it, yes.
It's technically his first canon appearance.
True. Although it's debatable whether it's canon, because Lucas still won't accept it, won't acknowledge.
Yeah, that's true. But we got the Lego special, and that was pretty good for what it was.
Yes.
It was very fun. Very fun.
Yep.
All right. Well, we have gone a little bit over here this evening, but there's lots to talk about. And my God, what are we going to do in the future when we have all of these series coming out?
We're going to pick apart the action design and create exciting new stuff for TPLA to put out.
Absolutely. That's what we do.
Terrascasi, baby.
Yeah.
But the real lesson is the friends whose elbows we broke along the way.
Yes. All right. Well, I guess that will be, we'll wrap it up here this evening. So I will thank our panel, Jared, John, Desoana, and Eric. Thank you for joining us out there in YouTube land. We will be coming to you with some cool stuff. Next week, me and Damon, General Sun, will be doing some classes on things that will kind of fit into Juyo and that kind of thing, Form 7 and that kind of thing. So people who have been asking about that, it's also going to fit into Saber Staff, because we're going to be doing some stick technique. So tune in for that next week. It's going to start next week. Check out our Facebook page for more information, website, all of that kind of thing. So thank you to our panel. Thank you to everybody for tuning in. Everybody here at TPLA, patience, practice, perseverance. Happy sabering. All right.